Good morning and welcome to Snow Hill Sunday Online Bible Study for Sunday, February the 21st. And boy, are we ready to see the 21st. Man, who is tired of snow, Paul?
Yep.
Yes,
Enjoyed it for a while. The while has gone.
the while is over. In fact, Paul posted something pretty cute on Facebook that, winters, it's been fun. It's been nice. You're pretty, but it's time to not see you again for another year. I'm voting for that. Yeah. Well, listen, glad you're here this morning. Hope you've got your coffee and maybe you've got a donut or maybe you prefer orange juice, but we're ready. And this week, we finish up our study using my friend John's book, Missional Theology. And we've just been talking about the missionary God and the God who sends the church into the world and what all that looks like and what it means for us as both individual Christians and part of the church. And this morning, we're going to talk about what does that mean for our relationship to other Christian groups. And so I hope you got your Bible and you got your coffee and you've got us and we've got you. So let's get started with prayer and let's ask Paul to lead us.
All right. God, thank you for the time that you give us together. And we just pray that you'll open our hearts and our ears to your word, to your speaking to us, and that we might see more clearly. And we just pray that you would meet the needs of those who are among us in the midst of all the snow and, of course, COVID and everything else that's gone on. There are so many who are doing without in a variety of ways, but we know that you provide, and we know that you provide through your people. So show us the ways that we can be involved in reaching out a helping hand to someone in need. Bless our time, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Paul, when I was thinking about this particular chapter, which is really about how we engage and how we understand ourselves in relationship to Christians who belong to other denominations or other Christian groups, I couldn't help but think back to drafting in Mr. Hornish's class at Northwest Classen. I believe it was a second year and I think we were designing our houses and I can't even remember the guy's last name, but Steve was sitting across the at the next drafting table just across from me, and he knew I was a Baptist and he knew I was a Christian and I didn't preach to him. That wasn't really the way it all worked. We just got to know each other, and we sit someone next to someone for a year. That kind of makes a difference. And he was part of another Christian denomination, a Christian group, and we had some fascinating conversations because he had this distinct impression that we Baptists thought we were the only ones that were going to end up in God's kingdom one day. Now, here I am all these years later, approaching 60, and I realized that there are really some people who believe that. And that's a little wonky. And so I'm glad John put this chapter in because we need to really understand how do we relate to other Christian groups. We've made it a part of our Sunday morning worship for now, well, I don't know, for months now, where we pray for other churches in our community, which means, well, we're praying for the Methodists and we're praying for the Christian church and we're praying for the Charismatic church and we're praying for the Assembly of God church and we're praying for other Southern Baptist churches and we're praying for the Missionary Baptist church and the New Testament Baptist church. I mean, goodness, if we can pray for them, surely we can figure out how to kind of see ourselves as partner with them rather than against them. So, you got any sort of recollections of kind of the first kind of inclination you had of well, like we kind of grew up pretty tight in our little group, and well,
Hmm.
you got any kind of recollections about that? How that hit you?
Well, I mean, I had a similar experience in school. I think for me, it was in typing class, and uh, fellow classmate had the same impression that Baptists believed they were the only ones going to uh, go to heaven. And I mean, we were pretty sure we were right. um, but I mean, we never grew up with that belief, and I mean, I still see some of that today. There are people who want to take what we might consider denominational distinctives. For Baptists, one of those, a big one for us would be baptism by immersion. And, Presbyterians don't practice that. And Methodists may or may not practice that, typically don't, but could. And so different denominations have different practices, and there are still people today who want to make that what might be called a first order kind of issue, that, well, we're just going to decide that people who don't believe the way that we do just aren't even Christians. And I mean, that's just uh, crazy talk to me. um, there are, I mean, I think it's worth acknowledging that there are some fundamental things to our faith that are vital to call ourselves a Christian. I mean, the Apostle Paul really simplified it. If you confess Jesus as Lord, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. He didn't add a whole bunch of stuff to that. It was very simple. And so those that can make that confession are part of the Christian faith. There are things that are differences that we may have that can make it difficult for us to try to say worship together in an ongoing way. I mean, if you've got somebody who it's, I don't believe that baptism by immersion is anything that identifies a person as a Christian or not a Christian if you reject that. But I do understand how denominations formed, that if you have groups that are of a conviction that this is what the Bible teaches and that it's an important conviction to them, then if you put Baptists and Presbyterians together, somebody's going to have to compromise their conscience on that. Not just a preference, but something that is a conscience conviction that they have about the Word of God. And if you're just going to have ongoing arguments about those sort of things, then maybe it's appropriate that we have Presbyterians and we have Baptists. And there are things that we can do in our world that we can do together. In fact, our statement of faith, the Baptist Faith and Message, there's a statement in there that we are a people who are, we will look for ways that we can work with other people of good faith who aren't Southern Baptist, who believe different things about things like baptism and church government, and some of those other things that we might consider distinctives to Baptists, but um, that there are a number of things and things that we have worked with throughout our history with others, relief for the poor, um, helping those in need. They're benevolent things that you can do together in a community that don't impact some of those beliefs. So um, I think it's good to acknowledge there are important things that we believe, and at the same time, realize that not everything is a fundamental principle of the Christian faith that should divide us, or certainly to point at each other and say, well, if you don't believe like me, you're not a Christian.
Yeah, I think maybe a quick sketch, and you can help me here, make sure I don't miss anything. But if we're really going to talk about the development of what a friend of mine helped him with when he referred to it as the Christian tree. So, for instance, if you want to think about Christians in different groups, you can think about a tree. So you've got your trunk, and your trunk is going to be that confession that Paul described. That's some of us learned out of Romans 10. Some of us are going to refer to um, uh, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where Paul says, unless the Spirit of God is in someone, they can't confess that Jesus is Lord, and that lordship of Jesus becomes kind of central. Uh, Whatever framework we want to use to describe what it looks like to trust God in Christ. That's the trunk. From there, well, you've got branches, you got twigs, you got leaves, and listen, that formed over time. And so when you talk about the first roughly 300 years of Christianity, um, most of the first 3 centuries were groups of Christians who still carried on some um, reflection of Judaism, because that's how close they were to the first century, what Jesus taught, and frankly the groups that Christianity came out of. And then as the gospel spread across the empire, you got a mix. You got Jewish congregations, Gentile congregations, and frankly, because you had Jew and Gentiles in the same congregations, why we have most of the letters that we have in the New Testament. And then once you hit the early fourth century, and things change. Christianity becomes kind of a not a persecuted religion, but and not just a tolerated religion, but it becomes the religion of the empire. And its form takes on the same form of organization that the Roman Empire had. And we could look back and be pretty smug. We independent types, we low church, free church types, until we realized that, like in America, low church, free church actually model itself out of the corporate boardroom. And so if we want to like say, well, boy, that Catholic Church, they really got it wrong because they formed their particular organization based on how Rome, the empire, had organized. Well, I mean, there's room for critique for everybody, but before we get smug thinking that the culture didn't infect us or affect us, listen, there's no such thing in the New Testament as a deacon board. But if you were in a church, in a Baptist church in the 50s, post World War II, you had deacon boards. You had board of elders. You had a you call it the board, and that was a direct modeling off of the rise of corporate America in the United States, and that's the reality of it.
Committees.
What's that?
Committees. I mean, you don't
Committees,
find
yes. You
committees
don't find it's
in the
exactly
Bible.
right.
There's no
That's exact.
finance committee or
No,
nominating committee
no,
or
that's right.
whatever. Yeah.
That's right. So when you get to the 10th century, you get the split between what we call the church in the East and the church in the West. It would be the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. And while we're at it, let's just don't think that these were monolithic. The Eastern Orthodox Church had different groups that were ethnic. So you had an Eastern Orthodox tradition that was tailored by ethnic sort of where you happen to live in the world. And and along the course of the development of the Roman Catholic Church, you had orders, both male and female, that rose up so that they didn't split off from the church. So when you think about Catholic orders, those are groups who are saying, we think you got some things wrong, and the church decided, okay, hang with us, we'll give you space. And then by the time you get to the 16th century, and you've got a lot of social, cultural, and then religious tensions that are going on, and you get Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the Wittenberg church door. And eventually that broke open the Reformation. And then the churches that grew out of the Reformation were frankly also ethnic. You based on where you were, kind of dictated sort of the form. So Presbyterians had a particular general area. Lutherans had a particular general area. The Brethren had a particular area. And then finally, you get to Baptists in England, which were actually separatists who had some affinity with Anabaptists, which were the radical reformers out of the Reformation. And though Baptist historians today argue about how much Anabaptist history there is among in Baptist life, the very idea what we got in our name, at least in spirit, we've got some of that same thing. So you really had Baptists in England would have been in the 18th and 19th centuries mostly. You had some early 17th century, but mostly 18th and 19th century. So I guess all I'm trying to say is we're kind of a little late to the table. And as Christian theology developed, we decided to pick and choose what we like from most others. And then we got some ecclesiology that was a little bit unique. And then here we are. And so all that to say that we probably should be pretty humble about our particular branch of the Christian tree, which leads me to something that Paul writes at John pointed to in Galatians 5. I'm going to read it. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Here's the important bit. Well, that's important too. But here's what we're driving at to see this morning. If, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. And so, in that particular point that the apostle's making, Paul, he is talking about a relational reality that has the occasion where he's seen it in every church, that potential division has led to the likelihood of disaster in the form of just tearing one another apart. What do
Well,
you
and
think? I mean,
I mean the image that he uses is very striking because I mean if we want to really get down to brass tacks, he's talking about cannibalism.
mm-hmm,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
if you continue to bite one another, you'll end up devouring each other. You'll literally tear each other apart with your teeth,
yeah.
eat one another up alive. I mean, that's
Mm,
gruesome.
mm,
And we look on cultures where cannibalism is a part of the culture, and we think, well, they're barbaric. Well,
mm,
I think that's Paul's point, is that in the church, if we're doing that, it's really barbarism.
mm,
It's being barbaric toward one another, not the way that God intended to draw us together. And there is a real danger of that. And one of the things about when you start going at one another like that is that the deeper you get into it, the harder it becomes to stop,
mm,
because the more I'm into it and the farther I go, the more committed I am to my position, and the more difficult it is for me to back off and say, wait a minute, I may have gone too far. And you know what? The conversation may have started in an appropriate place. It may have just been a friendly disagreement. And we turned a friendly disagreement into a heated argument. And by the time it becomes a heated argument, now I can't give up because I lose face if I do. If I say, well, I was wrong, then, well, I lose face. And I really think Paul's point is, well, then lose face. I
right.
mean,
Oh, yes, yes.
he says to the Corinthians when they're having an issue apparently of perhaps going to court against one another, he says, "Isn't it better just to be wronged?"
Right.
I mean, in the end, instead of being a spectacle to a lost world, isn't it better just to be wrong? I mean, okay, you were wronged. You have every right to claim your rights and say, "Hey, I've been wounded, and somebody should make this right. And if the world was just, this is how it would happen," and all. And he says, "You know what? You're right. But maybe it's better that you don't exercise that right. Maybe it's better that you just say, I'm wrong."
Well, and isn't I think it was one of our readings from last week was it's better, or recent readings, it's better to suffer for doing good than to suffer for doing wrong. So
Mhm.
if there is a point in which you feel like you're suffering because you've been wronged, you've not done anything wrong, you've done right. There's a fine line between deciding I'm going to retaliate, and now what started out as I could just, okay, I've been wronged, which is
And
the opposite side of stopping and saying, okay, okay, I'm going to stop. It's You're on the receiving end.
yeah, and that's exactly what Jesus did. I mean,
Hmm.
when Jesus was put on trial, he could have claimed his rights.
Right.
Hey, you've got this all wrong. Pilate recommended or recognized that he was innocent, at least according to the Roman law, and he was going to let him free. Um, Jesus could have said, "Hey, listen, buddy, you know what's right." Instead, when Jesus is before Pilate, Pilate is stunned because Jesus just doesn't say anything. He's like,
Right.
"Come on, are you not even going to come to your own defense here? I mean, you're leaving me few options, and you
Right.
know you're leaving me few options." Well, it, I mean, Jesus knew what had to be done, and so he didn't fight for his rights, and he didn't fight for his position, and he didn't fight for even his own justice in that moment. He just said, it's the way that God's going to work his purpose out is through my being wronged. And man, if we had if we got into theological disagreements or church disagreements or whatever, and we took that position ourselves, you know what? Maybe it's just better that I be wronged than things have to go my way.
Right.
It would solve a world of church conflict.
Yeah, and the truth is that when you said that if it gets in your, you get in a position where you're unwilling to give up or give, it really becomes kind of part of your DNA, and and you're altered in such a way that, you know, in Southern Baptist life, in your lifetime and mine, there's been quite a bit of division in the denomination to the point of, groups splintering off here and there, and it's really sad. Bill J. Leonard wrote a little book about Southern Baptists. Bill J. Leonard was a Southern Baptist historian, and he got caught up into kind of those all of those tensions, and he concluded that, when this happens, the only if there's no corrective, it's just ongoing splintering.
Mm-hmm.
Because once I get rid of Paul, I'm going to move on to the next person.
Mm-hmm.
So when Paul's not as whatever I need him to be, then it's time to, my appetites, blood's in the water, and I got to find something else to feed on. And so it's really what Paul's imagery is in Galatians is really powerful,
Mm-hmm.
which leads us to talk about this word that John uses when he starts this or titles this chapter, called missional solidarity. And 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 so, since we don't normally think of the word solidarity, we could use the word unity. And I told Paul, I thought that John handled kind of talking about Psalm 133 in a way that it's just three verses, but it has this really strong emphasis upon the power and what unity communicates, not just to the people who are together, but to the people who witness that sort of unity. And so let me read that. How very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. It is like the precious oil on the head, running down upon on the beard of Aaron, running down over the collar of his robes. It is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion, for there the Lord ordained his blessing, life forevermore. Now, I don't know. Paul's got a beard. I got a makeshift beard. Beards kind of became the thing some time back, even though I think I've had this now since like 2000. Um, there's this invention, beard oil. And so if you're really going to have a full faced beard, it can really get dry and itchy. So you can get a little dab of beard oil, and you can rub it into your beard, and it's supposed to kind of keep you get from getting dry and itchy. Well, I don't know if that's exactly what's going on with Aaron and his beard, but what they did have a habit of doing was kind of setting someone aside by pouring oil on the head. It was a ritual practice of distinction, and it was a sign of value. It was a sign of something precious. And so Aaron, as a priest, important figure in Israel's history in the Exodus, um, there's this reference to this oil, this precious oil And so the imagery is likening unity to that sort of figure. It's really precious. And then the reference to the dew on Mount Hermon is that Israel can be a lot like Arizona and a lot like Oklahoma, frankly, where we have a lot of dry creek beds. But you let some of those spring and fall rains come, and it's a good thing we have those dry creek beds, or we'd have flooded areas. Well, when the snow would begin to melt, some of the lands would need irrigation. And one of the ways they would get irrigated would be the snow melt. It's like what happens in the Rockies or in other large mountainous regions where the lower elevations receive their nourishment from the snow melt. And frankly, for instance, we like to go to Colorado, and when there's not enough snow to melt, and you want to go fly fishing in August or September, good luck to you because snow melts over. There's not been enough, and the flows aren't very good. The water gets too warm, and the fishing's terrible. So this was an imagery. Boy, that water's valuable. That water's precious. That water's needed. So, Paul, with this imagery in mind, help us because um, we've done a good bit of trying to describe differences, and then maybe the thing that holds us together. Sometimes people have a difficult time distinguishing between unity and uniformity. How would you how would you help us here? Because the songwriter is got a song of ascent. They're going to worship, and they're all of one mind and they're all of one heart. And it's just this precious, beautiful sight. Everybody gets to see. They're in harmony. But sometimes we're kind of like, well, I don't know if I could go with that family, you know. And so so help us a little bit with how would you help us distinguish that?
Well, I think it's important to think back and realize, particularly when the psalm was written, that Israel was comprised of tribal territories. And when you read the historical narratives in the Old Testament, there were a lot of rivalries between them.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain tribes that aligned with other tribes, and they'd pick on another one, and or they weren't real happy with another one, or they wouldn't come to their aid, or whatever. And so there was still a very strong tribal identity. That's been something that I mean that lasted into Jesus and Paul's day. Paul can trace his tribal heritage as a Jew. He says, tells the Philippians that he is of the tribe of Benjamin. So to be able to continue to track your tribal heritage, I mean, they're all Jews, yes, but they're coming from different towns. Those songs of ascent, I mean, it's we're not entirely sure what was going on, but one idea is that these are songs that were sung by pilgrims who were on their way to Jerusalem to worship in the temple together. And they might be joining people from, well, like when Mary and Joseph went and Jesus got lost. Well, there's such a crowd of people that, well, Jesus just kind of gets lost in the crowd, and it takes them, I mean, it's a day before they even realize that, oh, we thought maybe he was with family or something like that, because they had just, so many of them had joined together on their travels to Jerusalem. So if you can imagine this fairly large caravan of people who are traveling together, and they have something in common. They're going to a specific place together to worship the same God through the same faith, but yet they still have their tribal identities. They still are, it's somebody from another town, somebody from another state or territory or tribe or whatever. And so there's still diversity there. And there's probably still some rivalry that exists in Jesus' day, but for sure there was in David's day when the psalm was written. And so that rivalry, in fact, those tribal rivalries had characterized Israel for a long time until David unified the kingdom, but they still existed. If you remember the story where David finally leaves Jerusalem under pressure because, um, well, he's just afraid that the kingdom's going to be taken from him, and if he stays, that there's going to be an all-out war and people are going to die. So he and his supporters leave Jerusalem, and as he's leaving, guess what? There's this fellow on this hill over there who is a Benjaminite. Means that he's a relative of Saul. Saul, who the king should be another Benjaminite, not somebody from Judah. It should follow the family lineage. And there's this guy over on this other hill, and he's shouting curses at David as he leaves. Well, that's just an example of the tribalism that even continued while David was king, and ended up driving him out of Jerusalem for a while. So it's really kind of a myth that Israel was unified at that point. Well, but at the same time, there were things that held them together, things that they could identify that were bonds between them. And let me give you a modern day example that I think of. And that word solidarity is one of the things that kind of struck this in me. I think that's a good word. There may be people in our church who either do or have at some point in the past subscribed to the newsletter from the Voice of the Martyrs. The Voice of the Martyrs is an organization that just kind of raises awareness about Christian persecution across the world. Most of that persecution across the world of Christians is not Baptists. They're not Baptists who are being persecuted. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't any Baptists anywhere that aren't being persecuted, but by and large, those believers in other parts of the world who are being persecuted are Catholic. They may be a part of the Eastern Orthodox tradition. The most recent one that I read about was there were over 1,000 believers who were killed in a church building in Egypt. And that would be a part of one of the oldest existing churches in history, the Coptic Church. I don't even know what Coptic is fully. But when I hear stories like that, even though I don't fully know what a Coptic is, I know they're Christians. I know they're a part of my faith. I know that there's something that we have in common. And if we were to sit down across the table and talk theology and talk baptism and talk, all the distinctives and all of that, I'm sure there would be things that we would disagree about. But when I hear that they're being persecuted, when I hear that 1,000 of them are put to death at one time in the church, I'm like, wait a minute, those are my people. Those are fellow Christians in the world who are suffering and dying because of their faith. And we have something in common, and it's that trunk that you were talking about of the tree. It's that faith in Christ that we share together. And I may be out on this limb over here, and they may be out on this limb over here, but we are, that's an image that Jesus used. He said, I'm the vine, you are the branches. So we're all branches off here. We're all grafted into the same trunk, into the same root of our faith. And so unity is that sense that those are my brothers and sisters who were put to death, and that hurts me. And I want to be aware as a Christian what's going on. Uniformity is me saying, well, but they need to be just like me. When I think of uniformity, I think of a uniform. I think of what we wore when we were in college and we worked for Sears, the Sears Service Center. And everybody wondered if we were twins or whatnot, because we had the same gray pants and the same white shirt, and we wore those things every day. We looked the same. Well, that's uniformity. And even in our interpersonal relationships, we don't get uniformity. You, me, and Trent, we all have different personalities. Um, us and our spouses, we all have different personalities. Within our, even within our blood family, there are a lot of differences. There's no uniformity there. Oh, we can see resemblances, but there's still no uniformity. And the resemblance is the unity, the thing that we share these large things that are very important. We share these large things in common. In the meantime, dadgum, the youngest one has all the hair. you know, so uh, uh, that's kind of how I describe it.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. And then, we probably could call back here in the time we have left real quick that you've given a couple of analogies that are actually right out of the scripture that Paul uses for the church that actually, in a broader sense, we ought to keep in mind when we're talking about churches. So, for example, when we read those gift lists three times in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, for instance, um, and I think it was last week or the week before, you were reminding us that um, if we were all eyes, or if we were all noses, or if we were all feet, or if we were all ears, boy, what would we miss? Well, the same thing holds true. And so we probably should tie two things together. When we went through the Nicene Creed, we acknowledged that we're doing the best we can to say what we believe God has said about God's self. And that what's on us to do is to say, here's what God says, or here's what God said. And the idea that any one of us, even any one group of us, has it so precise and correct is the stuff of cults. When someone has finally decided that their finite understanding can grasp the infinite God, then we've crossed a bridge, and you probably shouldn't drink whatever they offer you. And so when that happens, we have to keep in mind that churches and church groups and denominations really are an expression of that. That if there's an emphasis on one thing in one denomination that's not in another, it is not just out of it's not out of sheer conscience as much as it's also out of, listen, this is how we're grasping God, and we're trying to apprehend God, and this together is how we see that. We could take the way you mentioned committees. We could take the way that Mennonites make decisions as a local church. They have this very developed process of discernment. I mean, it is a serious. We it would drive committee Baptists nuts because we gave a committee the responsibility to investigating and bringing it back to us and making a case for one way or the other. And then we get to democratically decide. That is not how it works in discernment. And so we wouldn't immediately go, they're nuts and well, we can't have anything to do with them. We would say that's how they're grasping, apprehending how God has expressed himself, and they're living that out together. And so, um, we could expand the imagery of the body to denominations to say that we literally need everyone doing their best to try to apprehend God because one of us can't get it done. And our denomination can't get it alone, and that denomination doesn't get it alone. And we appreciate the value that those other, quote, small t traditions bring to the capital T Christian tradition. And if I can tell you all a secret, and you won't tell anybody, this is why I like being a Baptist. And I've been accused over my time at Snow Hill of of some thinking that I was trying to take us Catholic. We started following the Christian calendar, observing the season of Lent and Advent, and Now, that pastor must be wanting us to be Catholic. Well, no, but we had no regular callback to an event that led to over weeks to the birth of Christ, and we had no programmed um, uh, series of weeks that led us into the crucifixion of Christ. Those those became values, and those were borrowed from other Christian groups or denominations that had been practicing them, some for hundreds of years and some not so long. And so that's what we mean when we're talking about unity and uniformity. We don't do it the way everybody does it. We don't do Ash Wednesday the way everybody does Ash Wednesday. We don't do Lent the way everybody does the season of Lent. We probably don't do Advent the way everybody does the season of Advent. We've been doing it at Snow Hill now for 27 years. It is to say that we need that. Unless you think you've got all figured out, and then really, like, you don't need us anymore. Um, and so that's one way, Paul, you were talking about. And then family. You had an observation when we talked about the church's family. What are kind of some things that you could draw from that analogy and back it out into a broader sort of application?
Well, I mean, Paul, the Apostle Paul, regularly refers to those that he's writing to as brothers and sisters. So his letters are very heavy on that kind of analogy of the family, and families are not uniform. When a guy and a girl start getting together and they start dating, you've probably performed many weddings in your day. I performed quite a few as a pastor myself. I almost never found two people who were, I just looked at them and said, well, you guys are just so much alike. um, in fact, I used a counseling program that was based on some psychological testing and that sort of thing, basically just to help the couple to see, hey, here's some areas that may be challenges for you. Here are areas that are strengths for you. Build on the strengths. Be aware of the challenges and don't let them become conflicts. And then, hey, by the way, here's some good ways when the conflicts do arise. Here's some good things to do as you work through those, so that it doesn't uh, become something that fractures your relationship. And in all my time of giving couples those surveys, there's only one couple ever that took that survey and it came back and it was like, oh my goodness. I mean, we have one who is way over here and one who is way over here. And in fact, according to the materials that I use, they're like, well, you might want to caution these two to really rethink, is this how they want to spend the rest of their life? Because there were so many differences about how they looked at some of the fundamental things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis as husband and wife. And you know what, they said, no, we're going to work through this, we're going to work it out. And equipped with the understanding of what those differences were, they're still happily married today, have several children, and things have worked out. That is not despite their differences, but in light of their differences. And you find that in nearly every couple. You almost never find two oldest children who marry each other, because the oldest child has to be the boss.
Says the middle brother to the older brother.
That's right. I am speaking. People, listen to me. I am speaking from experience. My wife is an oldest, and I am the middle. But there is a reason for that, and it is because there are those commonalities that can become conflicts that just don't work well together. So nearly all couples are It's not just birth order, it's personality. Very often you'll find one of them that's very gregarious and outgoing, and another one that may be a little bit more introverted. You find all these differences. There are things, though, that they have in common. Vera and I, we're not the same birth order. We have some differences in our personalities, but we have a whole lot of the same interests. We enjoy a lot of the same things. We share a lot of the same values. The differences, sometimes we still, knock heads a little bit over. But, and here's the thing, whether it's me and Vera or whether it's me and you as brothers, because we had our conflicts growing up. We had wrestling matches in the floor. We had lockouts and lock-ins and all kinds of things that happen. But the one thing that we always go back to is that there's never going to be a time that you're not my brother.
Mhm.
And because of that fact, that we always figured a way to work through it. And it's the same with couples who are committed to each other. You may have these times where you butt heads, where you have disagreements. It may get serious. There may be words and all that, but you figure a way to work it out. I mean, talk to a lot of the older couples in the church, and they know they've spent, the majority of their lives now figuring ways out. How do we work this out? Because I love this person. So how do I work this out with them? And I think our church relationships are to be similar to those family kind of relationships. We've turned them into transactional consumer relationships that mirror more of our culture than we do family relationships. Because if we looked at our church family as a family and not just as uh, a person to make a transaction with that I may share a few things in common with. I mean, you know what? If I go down to Walmart and the people in the grocery section don't treat me well, I can go to Homeland, and I will. I'll get mad at them at Walmart, and I'll start going to Homeland, or I'll start going to Cash Saver, or I'll go to Costco, or I'll go somewhere else. I'll quit going to Walmart. But that's not what you do with your family. You don't quit your family because you have disagreements. And what we've done is we've turned church into Walmart. I got mad at them over there. And so instead of figuring a way to work that out like I would with family, it's a transactional relationship. So I'm going to stop going to Walmart and I'm going to start going to Costco, which just happens to be the other Baptist church in town or the Presbyterian church in town or whatever. Well, families, you have those times where you butt heads, and in church life, you're going to have those times. It's inevitable because we're different people with different perspectives on things. It's inevitable. But if we have a commitment to one another like family, if we really believe that we are brothers and sisters, well, I don't abandon my brothers. I don't abandon my sisters. I may be mad at them for a while, but we figure a way to work it out and work through it. And so we still have our differences, and we may not completely resolve all of those. But at the end, we don't abandon each other because we look at each other and say, well, there's this blood and this love that binds us together, and I just can't abandon them, no matter what my disagreement with them is. Um, so,
That's good. That's good. Well, I hope folks that what you've captured is that the value of maintaining our awareness of our unity, not uniformity, of the plurality of Christian expression in terms of churches, denominations, and groups, when working together, actually becomes a highly visible means of expressing God's kingdom at work on earth. Because we know that the scriptures already told us that God's going to have a people from every nation, tribe, language, and tongue. So, what better way is there currently to work together for the greater good and well-being of all people in the name of Jesus by crossing some of those borderlands that we would not normally cross because we've decided they have to be just like us. And I can say that it's been really fun lately hanging out with the other ministers, some of the other ministers from other churches in town. And there are definitely some differences, But boy, what gets us together and gets us excited about what we can do together in our community. Now, if we could kind of translate that in the broadest sense to our into the world, then we've captured the heart of the missionary God that sends his church in all its forms into the world to express his love and care and call folks to trust in Jesus. So I hope you've enjoyed this study. We're looking forward to our next study and good news for anxious Christians. We're going to have a treat next week. We're going to have a third wheel, and we may treat him like that. So I'll have to give Paul some kind of tips to treat Jason that way. But my friend Jason Michelle, who's been with us, who's preached for us a couple times, has gone through this book and is actually doing a reading group with Philip Carey, the author, during the season of Lent. So I thought, hey, why don't you help us introduce the book? So um, we're looking forward to that next week, and should be a good time, and I think a good study for us during the season of Lent, because what God did in Christ for us on the cross should help us with our anxiousness. And so that'll be a good thing. So we might have gone a couple of minutes long, although I don't think so. I think we're good. We're about 15, 20 minutes away from worship this morning. And I have it on good authority that the parking lot's clear. If you can get out, and you have been coming, if you can get out of your addition, out of your drive, out of where you live and want to come in person. Otherwise, we'll be together by live stream. But whatever way we're together, we look forward to it. So let me lead us in prayer, and we'll be done. God, thank you for giving us an opportunity these last weeks to hopefully convey the kind of heart you have for people in the world, and that you're not an inactive God, but an active God who has a church for the mission. That is a mission of expressing what the shape of the kingdom looks like, and the good news message that we carry with us into the world, your love for all in Christ Jesus. So, God, we thank you for the opportunity we've had today. Now we ask that you accompany us into worship, whether together or by live stream. Bind our hearts, and we continue to look for the day when we'll all feel much more comfortable, safe getting out and getting back together. Until then, keep us in each other's hearts, on our lips in prayer, and on our minds in thinking all the ways we can encourage each other for the good. So we thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Till we see you either in 15 or 20 minutes or next time, we hope you take care. Good to see you.